Good afternoon. This is Paul Boyce from PWGC. I am your host and CEO and president of PWGC, the Environmental Echo. I want to welcome everyone back to our second part of a two-part series on the CLCPA with Alita Giuda from Couch White and Kris Almskog, one of our senior vice presidents at PWGC. Across the state, what kind of trends are you seeing, Alita?
So we have been incredibly busy. I first started working on diligencing renewable portfolios. So companies are coming to New York State, which is a very positive development to have the renewable industry, many out-of-state companies coming in to invest in New York, to purchase projects, to build projects. So starting in 2017, 2018, we started to see companies that were looking for, on Couch White's side, diligence of local and state permitting, as well as energy interconnection issues, real property issues. And my partners in those other practice groups and my group, we have all of those services available. So it has been a great one-stop shopping for these companies. So we assist them with diligencing if they're going to acquire or invest in or finance these projects. We also assist developers, just like any other client, with getting in front of the local boards, getting that wetland permit approved, and also IDA issues and real estate and the rest. So that started to tee up in 2017, 2018. As soon as the CLCPA was signed, and incentives have been coming at not as fast of a pace as I would have expected to support developing solar and wind, but there has been a frenzy. I will say that this year there's still activity, but the frenzy is a little more measured. And I think some of the problems that are cropping up in New York State that are additional hurdles for development are part of the reason why, in addition to supply chain and the cost of investment these days. The interest rates are triple what they were when this started.
Yeah, no, we've seen all of that. But with, say, solar, wind, the energy or battery storage type stuff, or even geothermal, which ones are you seeing sort of, get out in front of the rest of the pack?
So community solar has really done well in New York State. And I think that the numbers show that a significant portion has been this community solar program, which is where you set up a 5-megawatt project. It can be solar or wind. I had one client try to work on it for wind, but the town opposed. But they put their power into the grid, and then this is the one where you might see on your electric bills that you can get 10% off if you subscribe to whichever solar company's project in your area. And so you get the benefit of saying you're investing in renewable energy, even though you don't know if it's the actual renewable electricity coming to your door. And the community solar project is paid for that, plus, their power's out on the grid. And the utilities, that part of it is more my energy colleagues' expertise, but they get their renewable energy credit obligation satisfied by connecting these to the grid. So community solar has been very successful. There have been a number of large-scale wind projects that have been built, including, we're starting with offshore now. Couch White actually worked on South Fork.
You're down here in our neck of the woods today.
Yes, we so the wind has been good. Battery storage has been a companion to solar for several years. However, there is increased scrutiny over it just in time for New York to create a roadmap of how they want to do standalone battery storage to supplement power when the sun is down, when the wind isn't blowing. We've seen some fuel cell projects as well, and we've worked on those with Kris and his team. So,
are you seeing a geographic trend through the Northeast? And I've seen a few different things in New York as far as solar, but are you seeing different areas of the state really taking advantage, or some growing faster than others as far as solar or wind? Obviously, you have the wind off the South Shore of Long Island, and then a few wind facilities more central New York.
Wind, I would say, has been in the North Country, in Tug Hill, in Western New York. There's some others here and there, but because of the kind of spacing, and I think they're always starting from where is the best wind, the most consistent wind on average. Solar has been, we have not worked on community solar on Long Island. That doesn't mean they don't exist. There's been rooftop and other items like that, but I would say throughout the Hudson Valley, across central New York and the Finger Lakes and western New York and the southern tier, there's projects here and there. It's really going to depend on, similarly to other energy development, are there landowners that are willing to lease their land? And does the community either have no zoning, which is still a possibility in many towns in upstate New York, or is that zoning going to allow for siting a solar facility somewhere where you can get some land?
And so we're seeing a lot of solar in western New York and southern Finger Lakes and things like that, where it's allowable by zoning, and the town hasn't really balked at it much. And then I was just going to say, as far as we're also seeing interest in solar in old reclaimed mine sites, landfill caps, and things like that. That there's been a lot more interest in exploring those options if they can work together.
Let me ask you this. I've seen some of this myself, be it wind or battery storage here on Long Island. There's always public opposition. What are the public concerns and the usual opposition you're seeing to these types of projects?
So for wind, I have not seen, communities that would like its visual impact. For solar, there's some usually visual and property values. I have to say that we have only had a couple of projects where neighbors got to a point where they brought litigation on the matter. But yes, they're usually concerned about making sure it's screened so that they're not looking at a field of solar panels instead of a cornfield, which is what it might be today.
I mean, Long Island, you nailed it with the visual impacts. Nobody wants to go and see these things when they're sitting on the beach or out boating. But they've also claimed, sea life, interference, commercial fishing, birds, we've seen, legitimate concerns about that. What do you think?
So for wind, birds and bats, that has been studied for a long time. There is an impact, but the agencies have figured out a way to say, okay, well, here's a mitigation measure for that. And also it's something where it does result in bird deaths. However, there are a lot of activities that go on every day, like birds flying into windows, where it is something that happens that we just may not realize.
I get one or two in my backyard every year to hit. We get a nice picture window, and bam.
Yeah, we don't want them to be killed by these projects, and
Absolutely
especially the endangered species. And I think that both DEC and Fish and Wildlife are very protective on that front, but they have gotten it down to a science, no pun intended, of, okay, so we know from data from, I think, 15, 20 longer years of wind facilities that this is the average amount. So we're going to require in your take permit this level of mitigation to address that. Plus you're studying and monitoring what happens with your own facility.
And I'd say on that front, there is a lot of social media data on some of this, and most of it's wrong. And so the public, politicians, legislators should really look at the science and not so much. You want to hear what your neighbors and your people in your district are concerned about to be able to speak about it intelligently, but we shouldn't rely so much on going with social media outcry that wind turbines are killing all the whales or whatever the concern is. Look at science. Let's rely on science to kind of come to an educated decision on some of these things. Most of the concerns we've seen about solar arrays have been the visuals, and so we get involved and we'll usually do visual simulations of what it's going to look like.
Glare, all that.
Glare, and also what if trees are going to be removed. Yep. Can you see it from certain highways, some certain surrounding properties? So as Alita said, a lot of those things can be mitigated if they're looked at and designed the proper way. And so there are ways to get around some of the community concerns. So you're working with the community to give a product that's beneficial and doesn't really affect property values. So that's something that, again, that gets involved in the design and working with the town to kind of really give a project that the town and the politicians could stand behind, because there's really a true benefit without really hurting the community, and then they could back it up rather than kind of sneaking it through and just getting quick approval that something is not going to work. It's better to kind of get real buy-in, and educate both the town and the public on what the benefits are and how do we do this so we're working with you and everyone wins in the long run. You can get a project through once or twice before people get up in arms, but then it's not overall, for the overall benefit of alternative energy options, things like that. That's not going to win the long game.
Well, there's one of these things. It's the battery storage here on Long Island. A few towns have instituted moratoriums on building these facilities. People are concerned where they're sited or located. They're always, concerned about if a fire breaks out, it's very difficult to put out, and fumes, and what can be done to
So
get make these things either safer or convince people that, they can be sited properly.
So we have already been seeing this in communities around the state. There were 2 or 3 incidents of fires on smaller batteries in New York State, which has gotten people's attention. The governor has formed a commission to study the safety. We, on one project where one of the couple of fires occurred, we had a project that was co-located storage with solar, and the town brought the project in to say, hey, what can we tell the community? And the answer is to do what we do for any of our clients, which is to explain difficult concepts in a way that will provide the, here's the protections, here's how it works. The client engaged an expert who is former FDNY to talk about there's a specific testing standard to see the likelihood of fire on a particular system that you have to test the system at in order to be able to install it. And here, having an expert of that caliber was a great help. The systems are being designed with more and more protection every day to kind of try to isolate and stop the fire. But again, it's no different than someone saying, there's an issue that I don't like about this project. It might never happen. It might happen to a town near you once. But that doesn't mean that people are okay with it. And I do want to agree heartily on the moratoria. It's not just battery storage. I think that because of the number of community solar and the larger projects that the municipalities have less of a say in, because it's a state board that reviews it, that there has been a lot of moratorium, even by zoning standards, for solar as well in the past couple of years. And it's both to update their standards, but also because they're saying, wait, we already have 4 of these things. Do we want more? Where would we want to put them? How do we site them? And battery storage is purely because they want to regulate it at all. And that's going to be a gap in getting this roadmap forward. There are communities that still don't have solar ordinances, which is not that surprising if it's a small town that might not see much development. Some towns only have their planning board meet if needed. So battery storage, there is a model law from NYSERDA, but I have not seen a large uptake of it across New York State yet. So they might be saying, hey, we need to get something in place. And that's aside from whether the neighbors want battery storage in their community or not.
I agree. We're going to need it if we're going to try to,
Yes.
move the football down the field, and we've got to figure it out.
Yes.
We really do. Incentives. We've talked about geothermal on our show many, many times, and it's something that we hold near and dear at PW Grocer. It's booming for us right now. People are looking to install these things, and we're very familiar with rebates from utility companies and tax credits and a whole variety of other incentives. But what about some of these other alternative energies? Are there incentives out there to help people or companies offset some of the initial capital costs to get these things installed that you're aware of?
I believe there's rebates for electric cars. There might be some funding available for installing the charging port in your home.
Yeah.
There is some money that has been made available for buses, but also they're trying to allot some money for helping people electrify if they want to go to a heat pump. However, I think that the incentive is still not bringing it to a comparable price to a brand new efficient natural gas or oil burning furnace. So let alone someone that might have a wood stove, because that's all that's available around them, to then fund, think of the rural parts of upstate New York.
Absolutely.
I grew up on a farm with a wood stove. Where are we putting a heat pump in? And when it's 30 below one morning, I hope it's going to work.
Hope it works, keeps you warm.
Whereas that fire is going to keep the house warm.
These are some of the things, if there are assistants out there to help, because it's not only, as we said, supply chain and the labor force to install these things. It's going to come down to the dollars to be able to install them, as we talked.
Which leads to a bigger question as well. A lot of our clients are high energy users, industrial clients, let alone, we'll leave aside cryptocurrency and cannabis, which is also very energy intensive. Couchwhite works with a client called Multiple Interveners, which is a group that is some of the biggest electric users that they get involved in proceedings to when a utility proposes a rate increase, to provide comments, to try to negotiate something that someone that's using a lot more electricity than the business down the street because of the nature of their industry can live with. So when we say there's going to be funding, is it coming from our electric bills, from industrial electric bills, or is it coming from the tax bill? Those are the sources. And it can be the federal tax bill, but at some point, how will we accomplish all of this?
Good question. I wish I had the answer.
I've seen at least transportation and some of our clients who operate busing facilities or things like that. They occasionally they'll get grants when they're released to offset the cost of maybe 20-30% of buying an electric bus that they could add to the fleet. It's one or two buses in the fleet of hundreds. It's a drop in the bucket, but at least it's a trial program, and most of our clients are taking advantage of those when they become available. It's more of a grant than there are grants that I've seen on the transportation side so far that as they become available, most clients will try and take advantage so they can get ahead of the curve.
Well, that would certainly help. Free money.
Yeah, municipal grants as well, the Climate Smart Communities program, and NYSERDA has a lot of resources so that municipalities could start to put in charging stations and start to look at electrifying their own buildings or having ready access to get renewable energy to supply their buildings as well. So, there are incentives available there.
Keep them coming. We're going to need them.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, on that one too, a lot of the larger communities, a lot of the towns who have larger staff are able to take advantage of that. You get some of the smaller, out in the country, they might not have the same level of staff that are able to kind of look for and find those grants and take advantage of it. And so it's something that needs to be looked at on a wider scale throughout the state.
Okay, let's appreciate your time today. Let's try to wrap things up. One last question. Legal issues impacting the alternative energy development. Are there any out there? Any significant ones? Roadblocks, hurdles,
I think
obstacles?
The moratorium is certainly one, or we've seen some towns, because a moratorium means that unless the town board gives you the right to come in, you have to wait until they're done and then see what that law looks like if they allow solar. Some other communities are not banning solar, but they're making it so that there's very few places where it can be placed by putting like 1,000-foot setback from any wetlands, things like that. But I would say that on the legal side, even though it's not strictly legal, the time to get reviewed, because, for example, with a payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot agreement, the IDAs were already conducting their regular business, but now with a flood of renewable facilities that are looking for relief, that's, they can only get through so many at a time, even with attorneys that are working for them, because, it's just getting bogged down. And I think DEC permitting is not as much of an issue, although I believe the freshwater wetlands law, I know that we're going to have to very carefully advise our clients on when you're going to have to start considering that jurisdictional determination, and then your timeframes. I fear that the program is going to be much more cumbersome than the way that the Army Corps of Engineers does it. So that's going to be something that's going to delay development, and it's uncertain because it's brand new and gives DEC a lot of discretion to determine whether a feature should be made jurisdictional.
Chris, anything you want to add to that?
Blank right
You're good? All right, man, that's totally fine.
I don't want dead space. So
No, you're fine. Like I said, we're in the home stretch here. But in closing, Alita, do you have any thoughts or comments or topics we didn't bring up that you'd want to share with the listeners, either related to alternative energy or the CLCPA?
Well, I will kind of, bring it home by saying the CLCPA has created these two arms that have added a lot of new matters, new work that the clients need to address. First, on the permitting side, to try to help them make the demonstration they need to complete the Section 7 analysis on greenhouse gas and disadvantaged communities, to help them come up with ways to offer mitigation to make the project still workable. And then on the other side, we've gotten to meet a host of new companies and new clients that are coming into New York and help them with New York's, local permitting requirements and state and federal as well. And the projects, Kris mentioned the mines and the landfills. Those are some of the most interesting when we come across those, because they do happen. First of all, it's a very sustainable use for a feature that might not be developed otherwise, but it really combines our expertise in those areas already and helps the solar developer navigate those areas and make sure that everything is in place that they need in order to be able to develop on that land.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Chris, anything you want to say to the listeners before we
No, as far as
head
the
on out?
CLCPA, it's very interesting, very exciting to kind of head in that direction. And I think as long as industry and regulators kind of continue to find ways to work together to achieve it, it's exciting. And like Alita said, it'd be great if we can innovation and technology could kind of be, drive some of the path forward. And if on the regulatory side, I appreciate a lot of our relationships as it is, as they grow staff, and we continue to kind of work together towards seeing the greater good in how to get to that finish line and having I love just having real conversations with the regulators and figuring how do we move this project forward, because it is in the greater good of the community and the environment, and looking for ways to kind of solve those problems. It's something that interests me, and just trying to get these projects through.
Thank you. I mean, this was a great discussion and conversation today, specifically about that CLCPA. And I think as we started, we said, the intention's great. It's wonderful. It's going to be the implementation and rolling it out and getting everybody to get on board and up to speed with it. It's going to be probably more of a challenge than we thought or hoped. But it was really enlightening, and I hope our listeners enjoyed the discussion today. I do want to thank Alita Giuda, right, from
Yes.
Couch White, an Albany-based law firm where she's a partner, for joining us today. Drove all the way down here. It's a couple hundred miles, and we do appreciate your time, and it was really good to hear from you. Also, Chris, thanks for coming in again. Always
Pleasure.
insightful on these topics. And I just remind everyone, Paul Boyce, I am the CEO and president of PW Grocer, your host today. Yeah, folks, if you guys are interested in reaching Alita after hearing from her on the podcast, they do work throughout New York State. That's Couch White up in Albany. Alita, do you want to mention a website or a phone number or anything you want to share?
Yes, I can be reached at 518-426-4600, and it's www.couchwhite.com. You'll find email, photos, bios, everything you need to know about us there.
Awesome. Thank you. This is the Environmental Echo of PW Grocer, and I just want to thank our listeners for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed everything. And that's all, folks. Thank you for joining us on this episode of PWGC's Environmental Echo. You can download and listen to this episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or by visiting our website, www.pwgrocer.com/podcast. For more content like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode.